When you're busy going through a consultation process, if somebody tells you, oh, you're going to get fired, they're doing something illegal, you should raise a personal grievance, that could actually distract you completely from engaging in the process of consultation. That's completely unhelpful. Engage in the consultation process because you can still influence the process. When people go through a restructure redundancy process, unfortunately, they are so shocked, emotionally rejected by the employer. And all of us know what it feels like to be rejected by someone in our lives, especially when that someone or something is important. And of course, our jobs are very important, right? When we are confronted with that possibility of this relationship ending, we immediately feel like it's got something to do with us. Like we've done something wrong. How can they do this to us? Unfortunately, when it comes to a restructure redundancy situation, that's exactly what you want. You want it to not be about you. Because it isn't about you. What I want to tell you is that it is not about you. Under New Zealand law, an employer, if they want to make changes to their business, have an obligation to consult with you. Consultation and the restructure redundancy process happens in 4 stages. The first stage is consultation. They make a proposal to you. You review the proposal. You can agree with the proposal. You can not agree with the proposal. You can come up with alternatives. That's consultation. It's only when consultation's concluded that the employer can then look at a disestablishment of a role, and when they disestablish the role, they don't disestablish the employee. So then they have to redeploy the employee. It is only when they cannot redeploy that they can make somebody redundant. Whilst I understand all of those feelings of unfairness that you feel, please also understand the employer has an obligation to follow a proper consultation and restructure process. When you receive a proposal to disestablish your role, or that could end up in a termination situation due to redundancy, it's natural to go and talk to other people and ask for help. Where people have asked for advice on, say, Reddit, is they get this extreme advice, even from family and friends. Some of the advice goes, this is illegal, what they're doing is wrong, you should raise a personal grievance. And when people just jump up and say, hey, you've got cause for a personal grievance, when you haven't actually provided a lot of detail, then you should think about the advice you're receiving and think twice. Maybe then go and get some proper advice from somebody who knows what they are talking about. When you're busy going through a consultation process, if somebody tells you, oh, you're going to get fired, they're doing something illegal, you should raise a personal grievance, that could actually distract you completely from engaging in the process of consultation. That's completely unhelpful. Engage in consultation. Tell them what you think. Tell them what you think they've done wrong. Let them explain why they are doing what they are doing. Get the information that you need in order for you to provide feedback. Engage in the consultation process because you can still influence the process. And raising a personal grievance prematurely could be really harmful to the employment relationship. Remember that an employer can change their business any way they want, whenever they want. But if it involves somebody's employment, they have an obligation to run a consultation process. During consultation, for an employer to have a valid business reason to restructure their business, there should have been some work done. They should have done alternative things like, say for instance, they want to save money. They say that they're starting a restructure redundancy process. They're proposing to disestablish a role due to money. Then they have to show how they try to save money elsewhere. So it's important for the employee to ask proper questions so that they can determine whether they believe that the reason is valid. This could be things like, what have you done prior to proposing this? Have you taken any other measures to try and get the result that you are after? What other options did you think of and then discard in favour of starting this process? How did you select me or the other people that are going through this process as opposed to some other group of people? Why my job? Why this role? Why this department? And of course, you want them to explain the backstory to the restructure redundancy process, to the proposal. Basically, you want to be able to understand completely what it is that they are proposing, why it is that they are proposing it, what they did before they started the proposal process, what will happen after the proposal process is completed, where will the work go that you were doing, who will be doing it going forward, why is it disappearing. Make sure you ask all the questions you need to ask and get all the information you need so that you can provide good feedback. And if they won't provide you with that information, if it's reasonable for you to ask, then there might be a problem. Otherwise, engage in the process. And once you've been provided the information and you've provided feedback, they then need to come back to you on your feedback that you've given. When you are in a consultation process, it is very emotional. I often encourage people to write things down. Make notes when you're in consultation so that when you have gathered that information in front of you, you can use that in order to then, in writing, go back to your employer with your feedback. You actually have to sit and think about what it is you want to say. You have to look at the information you've received. And just saying to them, this feels unfair, I don't think you followed a proper process, that's not really valid feedback. They need to take note of that, but their response to that is going to be, but we do believe we followed a fair process. This is reasonable for us to make these proposals. And of course it's true. If they are following a proper process, it is reasonable for them to do what they are doing. So therefore, you need to put aside, you need to look at the business case, you need to look at the proposal, you need to look at the information you've provided or have not been provided. You need to, in writing, give your side of the story, give your opinion, give what you think, because then it's all there black and white, and they have to then respond back to you in writing. It's okay to take the written feedback to a in-person meeting and then sit there and share that feedback with them and then send it to them by email so that they have it in writing, because then they can respond back to you in writing. I'm not discounting your feelings, but I am saying, the feelings aside, focus on the content of the proposal. When you're focusing on the content of the proposal, I think it's important to note things like, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What could they do as an alternative to what they are proposing? What should they not do for whatever reason? What information is missing that you require in order to be able to make further feedback? What information is maybe superfluous that you don't need because it's not relevant? What other avenues could they follow to get the same end result? And most important, what I always say to people is, if you want to save your role, say that you do not agree that the proposal is valid, unless of course you absolutely have to, because it makes perfect sense that you do. If you do not agree with the proposal, say so. Say that you do not think that your role should be disestablished. Say that you think that they should retain the role. Friends, colleagues, people online, they want to be helpful. They want to commiserate with you. They want to help you. Just because somebody is helpful doesn't mean that they are the right support in the right situation. What is the right support? Somebody who knows the content of the law, somebody who knows how processes work, somebody who understands how to engage with an employer through a process without creating animosity. It is important to maintain a certain professionalism when you're going through a process at work. If you don't, especially in the current political environment in New Zealand, your employer can actually hold that against you through a personal grievance process. That can limit the payout that you might qualify for. Your employer can hold it against you if you don't behave properly during a process. So a proper support person, an employment lawyer, an advocate. You want somebody who can help you stay professional at work as you're going through this process, because you don't want to break that employment relationship before they break it. So get yourself a proper support person or an advocate or an employment lawyer, because then that could even save your job.